The SIG P320. Yep, we're talking about it 2 weeks in a row. Because literally while I was making last Sunday's video, an American Air Force serviceman was killed by his service weapon, which happened to be an M18, a SIG P320. That is really sad and should not have happened. And I kind of wonder what SIG is going to do about this at this point, now that there is an actual death attributed to that gun from an uncommanded discharge. We've had, people have gotten injuries in their legs, things like that. This is the first actual death I've heard of from a P320 firing uncommanded. Now, in this video, I'm going to show you what allegedly happened. And there are other considerations to talk about. Why was the firearm pointed at the serviceman? But at the same time, a firearm, a pistol in a holster should be as safe as an empty gun. Welcome back to Sawtooth Tactical. You've probably heard of this by now. This happened, last weekend while I was making that last SIG video. What allegedly happened, now this firearm is clear, empty, safe, empty mag. This is obviously not a SIG P320, this is a Smith & Wesson M&P 2.0. But I'm going to use this as an example because I have a holster using the Safariland QLS system here, which is apparently how this went down. So the U.S. airman who was shot and killed by his SIG P320 allegedly, again, but this is what it looks like what happened, took the gun off of his belt by removing the pistol off of the belt, the QLS fork, just like I just did with my own Smith & Wesson M&P here. And then he set the pistol on a table. Now, as you see I'm doing it, I am pointing the pistol away from me, which would be the natural thing to do. For one, that's just how your grip works. But for two, the rules of firearm safety always apply, and you never point your gun at anything you do not wish to destroy. That absolutely includes yourself. I don't want to destroy myself. I just showed you guys, we know that this gun is totally clear and safe and in a holster where the trigger cannot be pulled. On a striker-fired gun that has no external safety, your holster is your safety because it covers the trigger guard so that that trigger cannot be pulled. We're going to go over some other safeties that are on this gun that are a little bit different about the P320 within this video as well. Apparently, somehow, at some point, that holstered gun ended up, and I'm not going to point it at me, as if I was back here, it was obviously pointed at the serviceman who lost his life. Now, I don't know if that means that he set it down, pointed at himself, walked around the table to the other end of it, whatever it may have been, that pistol ended up pointed at him. But even so, it should not have been able to fire inside of a holster. All he did, remove it from his belt, set it down. Again, allegedly. I'm going off of the information that I have so far, that I've read, the research that I've done. Why did the P320 go off in the holster? Why have a lot of P320s gone off in the holster and not a bunch of other guns? This is kind of the question. So even on last week's video, actually I did a short the day I first heard about this happening, and I still got the comments from people. The pistol didn't go off on its own in the holster. It was a negligent discharge. Guns don't shoot themselves. And for the most part, I agree. Guns don't shoot themselves. In order for this M&P to fire, there are multiple safeties in place. So for one, you have a trigger safety here. Well, if you don't have your finger in the right spot, that trigger will not pull. And for two, besides that trigger safety, you have right here a safety plunger that blocks the striker from going forward and igniting the primer on a round. that can only be pushed up by this part right here on the trigger bar, which can only happen if the trigger is pulled. So most striker-fired guns absolutely should not be able to fire without the trigger being pulled. Now this video is sponsored by Aura. Of the two sponsors that I have for this channel, I felt like Aura was more appropriate for this video as we are talking about safety, and specifically an unsafe pistol, allegedly. Well, Aura, takes everything that's unsafe about the internet and makes it safe. Yes, I know, we're reaching here a little bit, pistols, the internet, but it is what it is. Aura does make use of the internet 100% safe. They go online and they find anywhere where your data has been leaked, and they submit opt-out requests to the data brokers that are selling your information to all the scammers and spammers. That's why you get spam emails, spam phone calls, people trying to scam you. It's because your data has been leaked. Because we're all on the internet in 2025. You're watching this YouTube video on the internet. Well, Aura gets you off those lists, and then you stop getting scams and you stop getting spam. You can try it out absolutely free for 2 weeks by using my link down below, aura.com/sawtoothtactical. And even if you like it and you decide to keep it, which I've kept it now for over a year, it's only $12 a month. And they do a lot more than just that data broker removal. They take care of all of your online security, all in one, really easy to use, really easy to set up app. Aura has actually improved my life. And I can't say that about many things, but I hate getting scam calls, getting spam calls, having a frickin' inbox full of junk mail, and I don't anymore, and it's all because of Aura. And for 12 bucks a month, it is totally worth it. Plus you get a VPN, you get all of your online security. So try it out absolutely free for 14 days, 2 weeks at aura.com/sawtoothtactical. So before the ad break, we were talking about how a striker-fired gun, such as this M&P here, cannot fire without a trigger pull. It's pretty much impossible. And you don't hear about M&Ps firing uncommanded, or Glocks, or CZs, or, pick your striker-fired gun, except the SIG P320. Now, why does it happen with the SIG P320? Well, the FBI just did a big investigation and a report on this, and while highly unlikely, it is possible for it to happen. The P320 has a slightly unique design. For one thing, it doesn't have this trigger safety. So, let's grab my only SIG that I own here, the P365, for example. No trigger safety. Again, clear pistol, no trigger safety. This gun does have a similar striker safety plunger. It looks different, but similar action to this one, kinda. The SIG P320 has a very different design for the striker block safety. A design that apparently, if you manipulate the gun in a certain ways, pulling on the slide, pushing, whatever, it can render that striker block inoperable. Now, in order for the gun to fire uncommanded, you need both that to happen and the sear engagement to fail. The whole point of the striker block is to prevent an uncommanded discharge if the sear engagement does fail. Both very rare things to happen. Also, easier for the SIG trigger to be pulled as there is no trigger safety, and it is a fully tensioned striker design, which makes for a much nicer trigger because unlike a Glock, we're going to grab every pistol here. This is not even a good example because I've got a Timney trigger in here, which makes it a fully tensioned trigger. But like on a Glock or a Glock clone, your trigger pull, the reason why it's heavy and squishy and kind of sucks on a Glock is because you're actually pulling that striker back against that striker spring, and then the brake is letting the striker go. Well, on other striker-fired guns, like the P320, P365, this M&P with the Apex trigger, the striker is already fully tensioned, which a lot of people consider that to be dangerous. But I just showed you all of the safeties that make it almost impossible for it to fire uncommanded. The P320 seems to have a habit of firing uncommanded. And now, very sadly, an American serviceman has lost his life because of it. Is this when SIG is finally going to do something about this? I mean, I feel like they're going to have to. I don't know what they can do at this point. I feel like their reputation has been so tarnished by the P320. I felt like that last week when I made last Sunday's video, and that was before I even heard about this happening. SIG needs to do something about this though, because all of a sudden, P320s are worthless pistols. For one thing, most people now don't feel safe with them. They don't feel safe carrying them. I mean, if you can't take a holstered pistol and set it down on a table and not be confident that it's not going to fire on its own, I mean, you can't use that gun then. That is not safe. You have to be able to trust your guns. And, you know, all of these guns are cleared and safe right now because that's what you do with guns. But you know what? When I am carrying, like my concealed carry gun, I consider it safe even with a round in the chamber if it's in the holster because the trigger guard is covered. To me, the holster is the safety. And if you can't trust that, you can't trust your pistol. And that means you can't trust the company that makes it because they haven't done anything about it amid mounting evidence that this is a problem. You don't hear about, like I said, Glocks, Smith & Wessons, Rugers, whatever, you know, Taurus, High Point. You don't hear about them shooting people uncommanded, but it's happening with P320s pretty regularly, it seems, at this point. And now someone has died. So what is SIG going to do about this? I don't know what they really can do, but they're going to have to figure something out. Whether they figure out a fix, design an entirely new FCU, the fire control unit, the trigger group. You know, they obviously designed a perfectly safe one with the P365. Nobody is having that issue with this gun. It's just with the P320. Now, the P365 was a ground-up striker-fired pistol design. And it's been a very successful pistol. People freaking love it. But people don't even want to carry these anymore or buy these because they don't want to support SIG. The P320, on the other hand, was not a ground-up design. That was a hammer-fired pistol design that they decided wasn't going to be successful as far as a business move, and so they redesigned it to be a striker-fired gun. That's why it has such a high bore axis compared to most striker-fired guns, which have generally very low bore axis. The P320, they went a cheap route. They took a design that already existed and they just retrofitted it with a striker-fired action, and it has been a problem. Now, in last week's video, I talked about, well, maybe they don't care about the general public, you know, and their reputation because they have these government contracts to fall back on. Well, after this incident happened, the United States Air Force put an immediate pause on any of their service members using the M18 pistol, and instead, they're issuing M4 rifles in their place. If somebody needs a gun, they get an M4 now because the M4 has been in service for so long, they know that it's safe. They don't know that the P320 is safe. And so, of course, there is going to be an investigation and all of this stuff. But at the moment, nobody in the Air Force is allowed to use the M18 pistol. And the public backlash from this is wild this week, with tons of ranges, training companies, Glock store, banning the P320 altogether. And why I said a few minutes ago that your P320 is now worthless is because even if you want to go sell it, gun shops won't take it. They won't pay you any cash for it. They won't take it on a trade for a Glock or anything else. And places that might still buy them from you are definitely not going to buy them for anywhere near what you paid them or what they were worth before all of this stuff. I've heard of places offering $100 for a fully decked out, you know, upgraded badass P320, which I get because they're not going to be able to sell them. Nobody right now is going to the gun store to look for a new pistol and picking a P320 with all of the other options on the market that are known to be totally safe and reliable. And so even if SIG doesn't give a shit about what happens to people, I mean, they've acted like they have not cared one bit about all of these other uncommanded discharges. And in fact, they've tried to disprove every one of them. You know, they've claimed that, you know, because if you have a weapon-mounted light, something can get in the holster and pull the trigger. That would be hard to do. You know, but I get where they get the idea, because if you have a weapon-mounted light, but like, that would not be an easy thing to do. And it wouldn't happen all the time just to P320s, but not to other striker-fired guns. So they're going to have to do something about this at this point, I think, because this is not going to be good for their company. They have lost the public trust. And people, like, I mean, it's all I'm saying. Nobody has anything positive to say about SIG right now. And they could have done something about this before there was loss of human life. And I feel like that is on SIG. Now, of course, there could be an investigation, and I could be totally wrong. And maybe there was actual negligence involved, and that's why this happened. But it's pretty crazy that once again, it's with the SIG P320. And from all reports that I've seen, it was a holstered P320, just like we showed at the beginning of the video, you know, Safariland QLS system, and that it was just unhooked from there, pulled out of the belt, and set down. That should not happen. No American military servicemen should be losing their life because their sidearm, their issued sidearm, malfunctions and killed them. That is absolutely a tragedy, and I feel for their family, and it's, I mean, that is absolutely terrible. So we'll see what SIG does about this. I feel like they have to address this at this point. I feel like if they had addressed it prior to this, they could have prevented this loss of life. And I'm sure that SIG now thinks that I'm an engagement hacking grifter for doing videos on the P320 2 weeks in a row. But I couldn't not do this video after I put out last Sunday's video, and the whole incident happened right after that. It just, I mean, it reiterates everything I said in last week's video, but just to, you know, the nth degree. It's wild. If you guys enjoyed this video, please give me a like. Let me know down in the comments what you think about this. If you are still on SIG's side right now on this, I don't know what to tell you. Like, I mean, for a long time, I tried to believe that it couldn't be the gun, that people were just using the P320 as an excuse when they had a negligent discharge. But it can't just be that. I mean, how come it's always a P320? Well, let me know what you think in the comments. From Sawtooth Tactical, stay strapped or get clapped.